I'm Sophie and I love books.
I'm Rudi and I love movies, and this is It Was a Book First, the podcast about new book-to-screen adaptations. Today, we're a long way from home, and we're trying to find our way back to our podcast. We're discussing a modern take on an ancient source text, Christopher Nolan's adaptation of Homer's epic poem, The Odyssey.
If you're new here, Rudi and I are culture reporters with bylines at Esquire and the Washington Post. And on this podcast, we discuss the page-to-screen adaptations that everyone is talking about.
Now, Sophie, this is usually where I would say you read the book, we both watch the adaptation, and then you tell me all about the differences. But today, the tables have turned. For the first time in It Was a Book First history, I read the book, or I guess I should say the epic poem, and you have not.
No, I just got to show up to the movie and then come to this podcast. I had a great time. Thank you for taking this one on.
Of course. It was fun. It was fun to get to do it this way. And so there will not be a Sophie's Choice today, but there will be a Rudi's Choice, which I'm excited about. We'll see how many of those end up actually happening in the future. But for now, we have one. And now, Sophie, you are not coming to the Odyssey completely cold, despite having not read the poem.
Yeah, I am what I would kind of self-describe as like a Greek myth girly. I was obsessed with these stories as a kid. I remember reading like that very classic orange book of Greek myths with the 4 white horses on the cover and just like checking it out from the library all the time. I have read Circe by Madeline Miller. I think this is like a really big moment for fans of that and Song of Achilles. And then also in college, in one of my sort of like nerdier moments, decided to audit a Greek tragedies then and now complet class because I had to drop it to take something for my major. And the thought of not getting to go to it was just like too upsetting to me. So I went and just did the reading and participated in class. And there we sort of read like all the stories of the side characters in the Odyssey. So everything about Agamemnon and Antigone and Clytemnestra and all these people. Antigone is not in the Odyssey, but all of those sort of classic tragedies. And yeah, I love lore. So this is just all deep lore. I love it.
So you're familiar with the Odyssey, you just haven't engaged with that text directly before until watching this film. And I think I had probably studied this in high school, although studied I would put in air quotes because I doubt I read it. I probably just read Spark Notes or Cliff Notes and did what I had to do. So it was really cool to get to engage with it this time and also engage with a kind of unique translation of it, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But first, if you're interested in engaging more with the source text, I am not an expert. I'm going to do my best to walk us through the differences, but we do have a couple of classics professors who are going to come on the podcast and talk to us about all the differences. We're going to do a deep dive. We're going to learn a little bit more about Homer's poem and how it relates to Christopher Nolan's movie in more of an academic sense. So keep an eye out for that episode, which will be dropping very soon after this one. So before we get into talking about the movie, the epic poem, I'm just going to go over the just the log line, the little plot real quick of what the Odyssey is.
A brief summary.
Very simple story. Odysseus, King of Ithaca, embarks on a perilous journey to return home after the Trojan War. That's it. We don't have to talk about anything else, right?
That's the whole story.
That's it. That's the movie. That's the poem. We're done. No, let's get right into it. Let's talk first. Sophie, I want to hear your general thoughts. What do you think of Nolan's The Odyssey?
I left the movie theater really, really liking it. And in the 2 days since, I have really come to love this movie. I am impressed with it as a storytelling feat. I think the way that he manages to make the Odyssey, the longest sort of stretching thing into this very mixed timeline story, just made the whole thing propulsive. Those 3 hours, it wasn't until like 2:50 that I started to be like, oh, I could like use a bathroom break, like stretch up the legs. I was really locked into this, and I'm so excited to talk to you about sort of all these very intentional decisions around how things were made, how the story was done, because it's really masterful. What about you?
Yeah, this is a big one, right? When we first started talking about this podcast, this is the movie that I pointed to and said,
Yeah.
this is why we need to do this now, because this is coming out this summer. This is going to be huge. It's going to be one of the biggest movies of the year. And it's based on one of the oldest stories known to man. And there's a lot of anticipation coming into this after the success of Oppenheimer, not only at the box office level, but critically, with him being kind of anointed as, an Oscar winner. And I went into this with high expectations. I went into this with the knowledge of kind of the general story of what the Odyssey is supposed to be, at least. And I love this movie. I mean, I like you. The first time I watched it, I really, really liked it. And I was like, I'm really impressed. I did a lot
You've
of.
already seen this movie twice.
So then I saw it again,
Rudi,
and I loved it even more. So that's I think a testament to how good this movie is. The first time it was a lot of, okay, so this is different. Okay, this is how they're telling the story. Okay, this is how it's being done.
You are now living my experience of every week.
And this is often how I view like a big epic film the first time, is I'm just kind of absorbing everything and I'm understanding it, and I'm trying to pay attention, but also like engage with the story. The second time, I was actually able, I feel, to like really immerse myself in it and just approach it as like I am watching a really well-crafted movie that I know the story of and I know kind of the beats, and I loved it. I actually felt it dragged a little the first time. The second time didn't drag at all for me.
I want to see it again, which I can tell you going in, I did not expect to want to see this movie a second time, and I did not see it on IMAX. I live near the Lincoln Center one, but I truly was like, these are not like, I'm not one of you. Like I can't take a ticket from some, like, please just go enjoy. So I saw it in a normal theater, but I would really like, once the hubbub dies down, to go see it on IMAX.
I saw it in like standard IMAX, so not the 70 millimeter full frame IMAX that you could see it in near your home. But I saw it twice in IMAX, and it was great both times. I mean, it's propulsive, it's big, it's loud.
It is loud. It is very loud.
It's an epic film, and I just really enjoyed it, and I'm really excited to dig in and get to talk about so much, because there's so much to unpack with this film and this poem. But first off,
a lot of discourse happening on the internet right now.
A lot of discourse. Before we do that, I do want to just chat a little bit about like our screenings, because I think that's part of the fun of this, is that Nolan movies are events. They very much feel like an event. I was at a packed Saturday 10 a.m. screening where pretty much every seat except for like the first two rows were filled. Everyone clapped at the end. There was, laughter in the very few laugh lines that Matt Damon generates, because I just think he can't help but do a few things that are funny. There was also a baby in my screening, which was not great for the first like hour, but eventually
not great for their eardrums.
No, they were at the bottom too, like in the first couple rows. You would see the mom kind of walk around with the baby in a baby Bjorn.
Stop.
No, I'm serious.
Insane.
Eventually the mom and the baby left, which I think was for the best. But that just goes to show you how hyped people are for this movie. They are bringing their children to it so that they can see it on opening weekend.
Oh my God, you really just shocked me with that one. I did see a woman in the movie theater with a Yorkie like hidden in her purse. So
same. How was your screening? Were people amped? Was it packed?
It was not 100% packed. I went on Sunday afternoon. Now, granted, I did go in the middle of the World Cup final, which is probably why.
Kind of a smart move. Yeah,
I actually didn't realize I was doing that until anyway, I realized after, but I did appreciate that my theater clapped at a few pivotal moments.
Yep.
They just like erupted into applause, which is something I always enjoy. But I will say, like, not one poor behaving person in my theater. It was, you couldn't hear anything because of the soundtrack, but you could, in theory, like feel the tension, hear the pin drop.
Sure.
Everyone was silent.
There is one non-Odyssey related thing I want to talk about, which is, did you get the Other Mommy trailer before?
Okay, wait, Rudi, thank you so much for bringing this to the podcast, because what the fuck was that?
Well, Sophie, So this is, if you don't know, this
No,
is
it can't be based on a book.
Jessica Chastain horror film that is based on a book. So we will be covering it on this podcast. I cannot wait. They don't tell you that in the trailer, and I wasn't sure if you remembered that we talked about that, but
I'm not even kidding, Rudi. I lean over to my boyfriend and I go, please don't be based on a book. Please don't be based on a book. And when I didn't see it, I was like, thank God, just says normal person movie. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm excited for this one. This is supposed to be pretty weird. It's like,
it looks deranged.
Like a possessed Jessica Chastain movie. But yeah, I'm excited because it's like horror, and like we don't get to do a lot of horror. Although this is
a
kind of a horror movie at times. Kind of a horror movie. So
someone said though that the other mother was right there, which like has better cadence than like the other mommy, the other mother.
Yes.
So now
that is a better name. Well,
anyway,
we'll have plenty of time to talk about that in the fall.
Yes.
So your history, we talked about your history a bit with the Odyssey. We talked about my history with the Odyssey. We both kind of have a little bit of knowledge, but not a ton. What about Christopher Nolan? Are you a Nolan fan in general, or not a huge fan?
Yeah, I am a Nolan fan. I feel like for a while, this is, it's very weird when you sort of realize how like public perception has just impacted you. Like in my head, it was like film bro.
Yeah.
But that's dumb because The Prestige is like one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
I thought Oppenheimer was remarkable. Like I fully went into that prepared to be like, this is not going to be for me. And I was just blown away. And I think, I have really appreciated reading interviews with him about this, with how much care he took. I'm so impressed with his vision for this, his commitment to practical effects, to doing things right. And I am like sort of all in on Christopher Nolan right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm someone who I've never really considered myself like a huge Christopher Nolan fan, but I think that I am without really realizing it. I've seen all of his films except for the first one, Following, which like I didn't even realize, most of them I have seen, in IMAX as like an event. Like that was, kind of how I think he first really came to prominence, right? With those Batman movies and those becoming such a big event thing. I think the only movie of his I don't really love, and I might like if I saw it again, is Tenet. Yeah.
Tenet is a bad movie.
I didn't love it, but I saw it at home. Otherwise. I wonder if seeing it in a theater would be better. Oppenheimer, great film. I didn't love it as much as kind of everybody else, but I still think it's fantastic. And it's one I'd like to revisit.
Adapted from a book.
It is, as several of his films are. I love Interstellar. I got to see that again, maybe like last year or the year prior, and I thought that hit even better on a second viewing. 10 years after it came out. So yeah, I'm a big Nolan fan, and I think to a lot of the points you make as someone who is such a champion for film and filmmaking, and like you could argue is the most important director of the last 26 years. Like I think
I have no idea how to weigh in on something like that.
But I think when you think about what he did for superhero filmmaking, for blockbuster filmmaking, for IMAX, there's an argument that he is the most important. Whether or not he's the best, that's a debate for another day.
There's no such thing as the best. Like,
but certainly the one of the most important, and kind of has changed the course of things a bit.
I think too, thinking about something like adapting the Odyssey, when you look at his other projects, like it really makes sense to me now, like why he was the right person to adapt this. I mean, he loves an epic story. And I think too, I really like the idea of Interstellar, Oppenheimer, and this in conversation with each other, really around the idea of power and regret and trying to maybe undo something that you did and thought was the right thing to do.
He loves a complicated man.
He loves a complicated man. But yeah, I really... the Odysseus and Oppenheimer in conversation,
absolutely,
I think is just a fascinating pairing.
I mean, they even have parallel final speeches in a lot of ways, which we'll get to as we kind of run through things.
Structures, which since of course I assume most people know, Christopher Nolan wrote both of these and directed these.
Yes.
How he does that linearly
Well,
and
there's I think there's
whoa.
also a key person, his editor Jennifer Lame, who we'll talk a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
about later, who came
Mm-hmm.
on for Tenet and has now edited the last three Christopher Nolan films. I think also plays big into that, and we'll talk about her
So good.
contributions a bit later. But let's start by getting into the background a bit of the Odyssey,
The
the poem.
Odyssey.
Um,
Just a bit of background,
just a bit of
couple
background. We're not going to go
years.
too detailed because we will have professors on to
Yeah.
tell us more about this. But the Odyssey, if you don't know, was first composed in around the 8th or 7th century. By the 6th century BC, like mid 6th century, to become part of the Greek literary canon. It was written by Homer, although scholars kind of debate whether or not Homer was one person, many people, or even a person at all. Homer, of course, also wrote the Iliad, which is the prequel, if you will,
It really
to the
is. Yeah.
Odyssey. And some, I believe, events of the Iliad kind of play into this version of the Odyssey. And this was really oral tradition. That's, I think, the most important thing to take away from the sort of history of the Odyssey is that this poem was told as a poem orally because of illiteracy. This it was performed often over multiple days as a oral tradition story. And so it evolved over
Mm-hmm.
time as a story, and different poets would tell this story in different ways. They would interpret it differently, they would add to it, they would take things away, and that is a great tradition that has continued today. And the poet is represented in Christopher Nolan's film by Travis Scott, the first person that you see, which was kind of surprising. Um, yeah, so it was kind of performed in
I
that
mean, it's really like
way.
doing crowd work. Like it was sourced. No, I'm serious. Parts of it were made more entertaining over
Yes,
time because they
yes.
were responding to how people reacted to it as it was being told. And I think, if you look at the Odyssey, it's like action, action, action,
Mm-hmm.
thing, thing. And it's like, yeah, they were playing to the crowd. We needed
Yes,
entertainment.
and it's a little slower in the poem,
Oh, I'm
obviously, like
sure.
there's than the movie version, but yes, there is a kind of there's also a rat-a-tat to like how the
A
story
rat
is
a
told,
tat.
and like, well, the sort of tempo of it, at
Yeah.
least in the translation that I listened to. So I think the most famous recent translation is the 1996 version by Robert Fagles, which was published by Viking Penguin, and that I think is often what is taught in schools. Probably would have been a version that we would have seen if we were in school. Maybe there was an earlier one, but that was kind of the gold standard for a while. The translation that I listened to was Emily Wilson's 2017 translation. This is the first woman to publish a complete English translation of the Odyssey. It was published by W. Norton and Company. Wilson had kind of a controversial take on the Odyssey because it is a little more feminist. It's a little progressive. She took liberties in the language to try to make it feel more modern. She did strictly maintain the original line count, 12,109 lines, and used iambic pentameter to give it this like punchy, kind of
Mm-hmm.
direct and rhythmic language, which really comes across in the narration from Claire Danes, who reads the audiobook version that I listen to. She very much views her take as an interpretation, which I think is really crucial for understanding Christopher Nolan's version of
Mm-hmm.
the Odyssey, because they are both very much interpretations. And Nolan used Wilson's translation as one of many inspirations, but this is one he's talked a lot about because it does portray Odysseus as a little more complicated than maybe earlier versions had. Not quite the same way that Nolan interprets the character, but definitely a little different. And it opens kind of famously with the line, "Tell me about a complicated man," which I think is also just a great way
It's a
to
great opening line.
great opening line for anything. Um, yeah, and so I listened to this translation and I really enjoyed it. I think it's engaging. let's talk a little bit about some movie background as well. So obviously, after Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan was like on top of the world, king of Hollywood, won all the Oscars, kind of finally anointed him as, this leader in filmmaking. He's, head of the president of the DGA now. And so after the Oscars, Nolan and his wife and producing partner Emma Thomas start kind of working on his next project. There were all these rumors that he was going to do a vampire movie, then he was going to do a reboot of a 1983 helicopter action film, Blue Thunder.
Oh,
And then in late 2024, we find out that he's making The Odyssey. And Nolan had been previously attached to direct Troy, a
oh my God, I didn't
2004,
know that.
2004 adaptation of the Iliad, more so I think
Yeah.
than the Odyssey, but a little bit of both. I think it combines.
And
It's
like
more
very
based on
important,
the
like
Iliad.
movie of sexual awakening for all millennial women.
Sure. But he did not feel like he was ready, and instead went on to make Batman Begins, which kind of changes the course of cinematic history in both good and bad ways. Amazingly, principal photography for this movie took 91 days from February 25th to August 5th of 2025. I was shocked to learn that they shot for 91 days. That's crazy.
Wait, because it's
It just seems like
so
so little. Like,
okay,
that's
that's
it.
what I was hoping you were going to
Yeah.
say. I was like, that doesn't seem like a lot to get this
It's
movie
not a
done.
lot. It's
Well, something,
crazy.
I mean, I'm sure you probably, like a lot of people, have seen all of Tom Holland's reactions to working with Christopher Nolan. It's been so funny to look. So basically, it seems like the Marvel Universe shooting schedule is a nightmare. And
Yes.
he was like, something that would take Marvel 2 weeks to Christopher Nolan 2 days. I can't believe how organized he is.
Yeah. It's
So that's how they were able to shoot it
yeah.
in 91
Yeah.
days.
He knows he's because he has really good people doing their jobs. This was the first feature film shot entirely on 70 millimeter IMAX cameras. They used a new, lighter and quieter IMAX camera that was developed in collaboration with Christopher Nolan so
Cool.
that they could also capture dialogue. That's always the real challenge with IMAX cameras, is they're so loud that you often
Mm.
have to ADR all the lines because you cannot capture the dialogue. So it still wasn't quiet enough for close-up scenes. You may have seen Anne Hathaway talking about this. She's been
Oh,
really
cool.
hyping this up. They would build these like kind of blimps around the cameras to kind of dampen the sound, and then set up a system of mirrors so that the actors could still see each other, because the cameras were so big because of this blimp that you couldn't necessarily see who you were acting opposite against. So they'd set up this mirror thing so that you could
Cool.
maintain eye contact. They used over 2 million feet of film reels to shoot this movie, which
Now,
is
Rudi, can I
insane.
call on your film bro history to explain to me, as a layperson, why does it matter to
Sure.
shoot on a special kind of IMAX camera? What are we
Well,
getting that we wouldn't get
you're getting
otherwise?
higher fidelity, and you're getting something that feels real and alive. That's the difference with, film. I don't know if you picked up on this in your, standard screening. It still should have looked great, but I mean, it
That was
looks like it was
gorgeous.
shot on film. Like it
It's
has that
gorgeous.
that texture to it. It doesn't feel flat and digital. What we
Mhm.
often describe as that like Netflix look that
Sure.
just doesn't feel real and feels kind of muted and, again, flat. That's what digital filmmaking looks like. The lighting is often not great. It just, there's something unreal about it. And what
And
is,
what's the importance of doing it on 70 millimeter?
I think IMAX film is 70
Okay.
millimeters. Like, that's just how
Oh,
it
it just
works.
is what it
And
is.
IMAX, if you're seeing it at somewhere like the AMC Lincoln Square, which is a capable of projecting IMAX 70 millimeter film, or digitally, it would be called like a GT dual laser film. Which, like, if you're in the DC area, the two Smithsonian's that have IMAX theaters, those are GT dual laser uh, theaters. They're able to project on this 1.43 aspect ratio, which is really tall. So it's like this
Oh, it's
tall,
getting that, like, it's the
um,
pictures of that extra part of
yes,
it.
almost
Okay.
a little closer to like holding a phone and looking at it, as you're
Yeah.
holding a phone. Like, it's that more taller kind of image. If you're in sort of a standard IMAX laser screen, like a what we might jokingly call Limax, that is in 1.9, which is still taller than the
Mm-hmm.
standard kind of like widescreen scope screen that you might see it on. But you're getting more picture essentially. And then with IMAX, you're getting just a better fidelity. One thing I would note is that if you watch particularly like older Christopher Nolan films where only some scenes are shot with IMAX cameras and
Mm-hmm.
some aren't, you'll notice the aspect ratio changing if you're in an IMAX theater,
Oh,
where like it'll
it's weird.
be in this scope thing with black bars and then it will expand and the fidelity of the image really changes
Huh.
when you see it switch. And it's something that you can really pick up on because the Odyssey is in that format for the entire time. I think it's you almost don't pay attention to it as
I was
much.
wondering because when I looked to get tickets at the
Yeah,
AMC Lincoln Center, and it was like 80
you literally can't.
formats
Yeah.
that first of all, it was all sold out.
Yes. Yes.
And it was the amount of formats I had to choose from. I was very overwhelmed. So thank
Yes.
you.
Yes. It
Anyway,
is an
back to the
overwhelming
Odyssey.
thing. The actual film reel that is used if you're seeing this in IMAX 70 millimeter is 11 miles long. The movie is just under 3 hours because that's the most that you can
Mm-hmm.
project on an IMAX projector. So there is a much more footage, but they got it down to under
Honestly, I'm
three.
pretty grateful we had that
I think we
restriction. I
made
could have
the
seen him
right
making
choice.
this like 3.5 hours and me
Yeah.
getting real tired.
I think they made the right choice. Box office wise, unsurprisingly, this movie's been a huge hit. It made 264 million worldwide during its opening weekend. It is Nolan's biggest global opening of all time, surpassing even The Dark Knight Rises. In the US and Canada, it made 124.5 million. It is the biggest live action opening of the year, Nolan's best since 2012. And this movie's just going to keep
Oh
making
yeah.
money. I mean, this is going to be something that I think is going to continue making bank all the way up until the Oscars, and we'll talk a little bit about what
Yeah.
Oscar chances there are. But this movie's going to have long
Well,
legs.
and I think too the same way, Project Hail Mary stayed in theaters for
Yes.
months. I think this will too. And it's not just the movie. I think the last time I looked, Emily Wilson's translation of the Odyssey was #2 on Amazon. So
Yes, it's
the world
definitely
is Odyssey pilled right
they're
now.
Odyssey pilled as we kind of expected. Now there are other adaptations of the Odyssey that have been made in the past, although no one's really made a modern, large scale
Isn't that so
Hollywood
surprising?
movie of this. Yeah, it is. The closest was maybe in 1954, Ulysses, starring Kirk Douglas. And uh, Odysseus is sometimes called Ulysses. I don't really know why. I didn't dive too deep into that. We can talk to the professors
Okay.
about that, but that
Yeah.
happens. And James Joyce's 1922 novel Ulysses is in some part based on the Odyssey as well. There is a 1997 TV miniseries starring Armand Assante that I think was maybe people's like kind of closest version of like, oh, I've seen the Odyssey on screen, was that
Mm-hmm.
that miniseries. Troy that we talked about, directed by Wolfgang Peterson, with Sean Bean playing Odysseus, and Brad Pitt is of course in that film. That was maybe one of the more famous adjacent adaptations of the Odyssey universe. In 2024, we got The Return, directed by Uberto Pasolini, starring Rafe Fiennes and Juliette Binoche, and that was actually like the second half of the Odyssey,
Mm-hmm.
adapted for a movie. So it's like when Odysseus comes back, and then arguably the best and most famous adaptation of the Odyssey is one that you might not even know is an adaptation of the Odyssey, and that's the Coen brothers, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh my, one of the all-time great movies, truly.
Yes, and you might not think about it, but if you go and kind of trace the plot
It's
with the plot of the Odyssey,
definitely
it's pretty
there's a
much the same
Cyclops.
story. Yeah, it's kind of wild.
Yeah,
It's
and I'd like to just really put in a plug for anyone who has not seen that movie. It is
it's
truly
so funny.
phenomenal.
Yeah, I watched it a couple of years ago, and it's great. I mean, it's just funny. The music's great.
Great
Clooney's
music.
great. Very entertaining film. Okay, so that's kind of everything you need to know heading in. We are now going to talk about Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. We are going to spoil this movie. We are going to spoil the poem. We're going to talk about
like,
some
let's all be
major
mature
differences.
about this.
Yeah,
Like, it's been
it's
around.
fine.
You
I
had
will
time.
tell you that the thing that I was most nervous about going into this was because I'm engaging with the poem. Am I going to be a little let down when I see the film, because usually the reason that I don't like to read the book beforehand is because I like to be surprised. I like to know as little about a movie as
So
I
that's
can
me,
when
but
I
the
go into
exact
it.
opposite, where I need to not know what's happening in the book, and then I'm okay with it for the
Yeah.
movie. But that's why we're doing this
I don't want to
podcast.
know anything if I can. I just want to go in cold and just experience it as a marvel of cinema. And so it was interesting going in that way. But I will say, like I said earlier, my second viewing was even better than the first. So it really doesn't matter if you know what happens. It still hits. It does not matter.
Yeah, there's so much going on in this and so much plot. Like, the thing is, too, we know that the Odyssey is about trials and tribulations. Like, we know he has
Yes.
a tough time getting home. So, if you're expecting him to keep landing on these islands and just be met with hospitality and ease, like, I don't know what you thought you were signing up for. So, it should be no surprise, sort of, what might
Yes.
happen in some of these beats. And I just think there's too much good stuff going on to feel like plot could ruin this.
Yes. It really is not that important to the actual
No.
story. And so this movie opens differently from the poem. The poem starts kind of in media res.
Oh, Rudi, this is
With
so fun. Tell me what happens.
it starts
I'm
in media
serious.
res, and it's really telling Telemachus' story at
Okay.
first. And a lot of the kind of preamble of the movie, the stuff happening on Ithaca at the palace, Telemachus going and trying to get more answers about his father. That
Mm.
happens at the beginning. We actually don't see Odysseus in the poem until book 5. So there are
Oh,
24 books of the Odyssey. It's kind of divided into, when you're listening to it, they're about 20-ish, 20 to 40
okay.
minute kind of chapters, if you will. But they're books. So he doesn't show up for a while. We hear a lot about him, but it's really focusing first on uh Telemachus.
Uh,
Telemachus. It's
I
really
mean,
focusing first on. I'm
I
gonna
think that
butcher
in guys
names,
in
but
general, we are not going to be doing a great job with Greek pronunciation. And
yes,
please don't write to us
we
about
might
it.
just sometimes call him Tom Holland. So this
Yeah,
is
like,
played by Tom
we
Holland,
didn't claim to be good at it.
and you get enough backstory and detail to know what's going on, but it just kind of throws you into it, which, like, I did not expect for a story that is this old to not hold your hand at the
Yeah.
beginning.
Oh,
I
that's
was actually
interesting.
very impressed by that, and I guess it makes sense why this is something people have studied and why teenagers find it so challenging, is because you are just thrown into it and kind of expected to figure it out as you go along. And so in the movie, it's a little bit different. We're doing a lot of cross cutting. There is a
Mm-hmm.
lot of sort of, we're jumping between different scenes. We open with, again, Travis Scott's, bard character kind of slamming his staff, keeping the beat.
I don't
Um,
know why I was really expecting this to be a linear narrative. And I almost felt like relief once I
yeah.
realized it wasn't going to be.
And it becomes more linear as it goes on, but I
Sure,
think
at
it
the
uses
end,
this like
you know.
framing device to kind of keep it from being linear, which it also
Well,
borrows from the book, from the poem, but adjusts a little bit.
I think too, the way it really unravels the carnage. Like, you don't
Yes.
see Troy right away. Troy is
Yes.
flashbacks.
Well, and Troy is not really in the poem either.
No, Troy is
That's
part of
what's
the Iliad.
that's what's interesting. And the whole kind of opening with Elliot Page's character Sinan, who is an invention for this movie based on a like kind of
Uh,
different
yeah,
story. Sinan is not entirely invented, but
right.
is
I was
not
going to
in
say,
the Odyssey. Sinan is introduced in Virgil's epic poem, the Aeneid.
the
Aeneid?
Aeneid.
The Aeneid. Thank you, Sophie. And so Nolan took that and added it to this story.
And
And
we
I
should say the
think
Aeneid comes many centuries after these two, but in terms of when it was written, and it was more of like a political book
right,
that was made to retell this tale. But these three, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid, are often, the three major
sure.
ones.
And so we see Sinan standing in front of this wooden horse on a beach when soldiers approach him and shoot him and kill him after he tells them that this is a gift. And we see people dragging this horse back to Troy. And that's
Hey,
kind of how it opens.
they're
And
so dumb. It didn't really hit me how dumb that was until I watched it, where I was like, that was really stupid to bring
yeah,
that in.
it was. But, that's kind of the foundation
No,
of
I
the
know. It's
text.
just when you watch it happen, you're just like, wow, that was okay.
Right. And if you don't know the story at that point, you actually don't know what's going on, which I think is also really,
Can
really
you
smart.
imagine not? Okay, well, sorry, I shouldn't
Yeah.
assume things,
But
but I
some
feel
people
like we
don't.
know
You have to
about
think about this.
Troy.
Well, think about it too, that people might, I mean, I don't know about you, but I always think of the Trojan horse as like this more goofy thing on wheels. I don't think of it as this
Sure.
like majestic, actual looking like a real horse buried in the sand that, men have to pull to get to Troy. Like that was a
And weren't they
really
curious
cool.
about why it was so heavy?
I had that thought too.
The
It's filled
wood, the
filled with sand.
hollow wood doesn't really make sense.
And
Anyway,
yeah, and so that's kind of a big establishing scene at the beginning. We are then introduced kind of again in this sort of like almost very like Terrence Malick-y, much like Oppenheimer, kind of like vibey
it's like
intercutting
Planet of
between
the Apes.
different scenes of, you get what's happening at Ithaca. You get the Penelope, who is Odysseus's wife, played by Anne Hathaway, brilliant in this, and we'll talk
Phenomenal
more about
performance.
how
I
good
think
she
she's
is.
the probably the strongest of the
I
women
Yeah,
in
I,
this.
I agree. Uh, we we're in the palace with her. We're in the palace with Tom Holland. We're in the palace with the suitors, and because
Oh,
Odysseus has been gone for so long, it's been unclear kind of like in the film if it's like the full 20 years because again it moves around a little bit, like sometimes it's probably a little earlier in time and sometimes it's later, but he's been gone for a long time.
a long time.
He's been away for a long time, and now these suitors have come to the palace and they want to take Penelope's hand in marriage because Odysseus is presumed dead, and
Yeah, they
she
want to
is
be the king of
trying
Ithaca.
to prevent that. And so we learn kind of a lot of the foundations of the story, which is, you know, Penelope is making this loom, which is really important because it's why the suitors have not made more of an effort to be like, you must take a husband. She is basically making this loom and saying that when she's done with it, she will marry someone, but she unravels it every night. And this is part of Penelope's strategy and Penelope's cunning. And I think that's one of the things that's really important about her character, is that she's almost as strategic as Odysseus is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's demonstrated really well, I think, in the film. And so the story kind of takes off with, again, we're intercutting between sort of like different plots. We see Odysseus a lot earlier in the film, understandably, than we would have in the poem, because you kind of got to get to him early
Well,
on.
I
He
think they
is the
wanted to bring
star.
Matt Damon out.
Yeah, you got to bring Damon out. We get this framing device involving the dog Argos, which is very, very different from
Rudy,
the poem. And I know, Sophie, you're going to have a
don't
lot to
get
say
me
about this.
started on the dogs. Okay. Extreme warning for anyone listening, and this should not put you off seeing the movie, but there is multiple dog
There is,
deaths. There's animal
especially very
cruelty.
early.
There's animal cruelty. And it was upsetting. And I cried, and my boyfriend had to hold my hand. And I just, I just think it would have helped if I had known going in. And so
Right.
I'm telling you.
But early on, I think what the first like 20 or 30 minutes of the film is trying to do is set the table, right? So we're getting
Sure.
all
Yeah.
these like flashbacks, we're getting some stuff in the future. We learn about Antinous, Robert Pattinson's character, and
Oh,
Sinon, Elliot Page's character, and how they traded places to fight in the war. We watch them as children watching Odysseus hunt with Argos. Argos is a dog that he essentially saves from being thrown off a cliff
off a
when a
cliff.
bunch of puppies are born, and he becomes a hunting dog. We see Odysseus get attacked by the boar, which is a very important thing for later in the story. There's a lot of like table setting. We understand what's going on, the dynamic with the suitors and Telemachus, and the John Leguizamo character, the blind sort of seer who's now like a pig farmer. and I'll pronounce his name wrong, which is why I haven't said it, but I'll say it eventually. And we're getting a lot of table setting early on to just set this story up. And then eventually we kind of land on this framing device of Odysseus. I think there's a moment where we kind of see Odysseus sort of like wake up. And Odysseus is
He's on a
on the
vacation
beach with
at an
Calypso,
all-inclusive resort with Calypso,
played by
you
Charlize
can eat
Theron.
lotus flower.
He's eating the lotus flower. One of the few laugh lines in my first screening of this film was when she tells him to stop eating the lotus flower, and he goes, "But I like it."
Yeah, that was a good one. There, as you said, there's a couple real moments where you're like, "That's Matt Damon."
Yes. And so he is trapped with Calypso, and he doesn't remember what has happened. He doesn't remember the war. He doesn't remember his family. He doesn't remember why he's there. And so we use this framing device of Calypso helping him remember what has happened for Odysseus to essentially tell of his journey that got him to that island and will eventually get him home. This is very different from the poem. In the poem, he leaves the island, goes to visit the Phaeacians, and he tells his tales to the Phaeacians. I understand why Nolan decided to nix that and just make Calypso as the framing device. One, it allows you to have Charlize Theron in for more of the story.
Completely
Two, it's just a little
thankless
more
role.
It's
God, that of all the women performances, I was just like, can we get anything but you being like, remember? Remember.
It's basically all she does.
I would have liked more.
And so it makes it a little bit more compact. I think it helps keep the story from like getting too far flung and too intense. And I'm sure that there are some purists who are going to be annoyed that that's the case, but it didn't bug me at all.
I think if you're a purist of the Odyssey, you're coming in prepared to hate this.
Yes.
You are someone who is not going to like a singular change made.
And a big thing with Nolan's adaptation is you just get a lot less of the journeying from like land to land and palace to palace. Like Telemachus goes to more places than he does in the film. So does Odysseus. You just get a lot of how the different cultures relate to strangers, which is a really big part of the story.
We should talk about that. I mean, Zeus's
Law
or Zeus's Law is essentially the theme of this. I saw a tweet from someone say they never explain what Zeus's Law is, and I was
they don't have to. It's implied.
So sorry,
throughout.
They explain 900 times what Zeus's Law is. So Zeus's Law is essentially that anyone who comes to your home, you have to bring in because they could be a god in disguise.
Right.
And so we see this with beggars coming to the palace. We see this with how people are brought in throughout. And it is, we're going to get to sort of the ending later, but this is really the central theme of this movie is, giving people who are different than you and you do not know from foreign lands shelter and treating them with dignity.
And that gets to, I think, a big theme and point of Nolan's version of this, which is it's modern. It is speaking to a modern audience. It is talking about immigration. It is hitting on a lot of modern themes, which I think is so deftly done in this kind of story. It's really, really well done.
Yeah, and I think the way the whole story reframes who is an invader, who is a host, and how we look at how they are received on these different islands and where violations happen or don't happen that causes violence towards one party or the other. I mean, I will just say that I think that is why I have really come to feel more strongly about the movie since, is because I've just really been sitting with that and reading very smart people write about it. And when you say it's deftly done, it is not banging you over the head with it. This is not a preachy movie. I did not get the sense that this movie is sort of like overly important. It just is in the story. And where I think this is such a successful adaptation is it feels And where I think he, used Emily Wilson's translation very specifically is it feels like it's in the text. It feels like
Yes.
it's in the story. It doesn't feel invented.
Yes. And even though many things are invented or interpreted from the text, it feels true to it in a way that I think is really impressive. And for all the controversy and conservative hand wringing over the casting of certain actors, the colorblind casting of Helen with Lupita Nyong'o, or of Elliot Page being involved, this is not beating you over the head with woke or anything like that.
No.
Like,
first of all, the idea that Lupita Nyong'o existing is somehow a woke statement and not just clearly showing us the most beautiful woman in the world, like, please be so serious.
Yeah. And the idea of hospitality and Xenia and Zeus's law, the idea is that really the fabric of society is crumbling because we are losing this. That is a big theme.
Prescient.
And again, prescient. And also, as we learn as the story goes on, kind of Odysseus' fault. Despite trying to maintain that, it is also very much his fault and something that he reckons with. And so I think framing device on the island allows Odysseus to tell his tale. Mm-hmm. And we then get to jump between all the travels of Odysseus and also cutting back to Ithaca, cutting to Telemachus's journey. It's really well done in keeping the story kind of moving and going back and forth between past and present, which is also something that the poem does really well. And so let's go through some of the journey.
When he was like, I'm not going to go behind Agamemnon. I'm just going to go on my own route. It was like in Fiddler on the Roof when they're like, we're going to Poland. And you're like, don't go to Poland. Yeah. I was like, can you just take the trade routes? Like, seems like a good idea, bud.
So for some reason, Odysseus, I guess because of his own hubris, he decides just
classic
to go.
Man, like, I don't need directions. Like, going to do my own thing.
He decides to go his own way. And I think the first interaction that we get, the first sort of set piece, major set piece of the film, is the Cyclops scene. And now
the Cyclops is so good.
The Cyclops scene is very different from the poem. Okay. And I want to talk a little bit about that. But also it's incredibly well done in the film. It is.
Did you see that they shot this in a cave in Greece that is the birthplace of Zeus?
I did.
Rumored to be the birthplace of Zeus.
And not only that, but they used a puppet.
The puppet's so cool looking.
Now, it is CGI in the film, but they used a puppet for the characters to react to, which I think is really, really cool.
It seems like that was done quite a bit, where they sort of set up something with a practical effect, like the whirlpool, where they made a whirlpool to then put the CGI effects into.
And that creature who then pulls the men out of the ship later on as they're passing through a channel, they used some machinery to actually pull the people out, which
that was a
again,
jump scare.
Cool.
I did yelp out loud for that one.
That was so cool.
I was like, oh.
So the Cyclops scene, which I think is really, really like tense and haunting and like horror-like in the movie.
There's a lot of body horror in this throughout. And this is one of the, first places that we really see that.
Yes. We also get the artisanal cheese. Which...
Okay. I was really into that got a laugh in my theater when they're like, oh, he has like sheep milk cheese. I'd like to know more about the fromagier,
How does he milk the sheep?
Okay.
He's so big. They're so small.
I have a lot of questions, but
well, the big difference between the Cyclops scene in the book, which I want to point out, in my opinion, was the most thrilling passage of the poem. I was on a hike in Rock Creek Park, which if you're in the DC area, Rock Creek Park, and I'm listening to this part and I'm just like, the Odyssey, yeah, it's like really good. I get it. I finally get it. I've been a little like, I don't know about this. Like this is a little slow. I'm liking it, but then I was like, oh, finally we have some like action and it's like really thrilling. Action. Here it's a little more like horror. And the big difference is that Odysseus, he kind of hangs out and talks to the Cyclops a little bit, Polyphemus. He gets him drunk. And this is an example of Odysseus showing his wit, his cunning, and his hubris, because he tells him his name is Nobody. So when they burn the eye Polyphemus calls for his Cyclops buddies, because he's got a lot of friends, to come help out. They go, who's attacking you? He goes, nobody is attacking me. And so they all leave and run away.
That's
and so
genius.
then as Odysseus and his men are leaving, he says, oh, actually, my name's Odysseus. And the Cyclops, who is the son of Poseidon, says, Dad, curse Odysseus and make it so he doesn't make it home, or if he does, it takes a long time and he's alone. So it really sets the entire journey from there on.
Oh, yeah.
It sets it off at that point, because he curses him. And as we know, the gods kind of dictate things in this world. And we can talk more about the God aspect of all of this and what the movie does and doesn't do.
Sure.
So it's a little bit different. And I think what's interesting about it is that it shows most clearly the difference between Homer's Odysseus and Nolan's Odysseus. Homer's Odysseus is a lot more of a trickster. He is constantly lying to people. He's an unreliable narrator. He is in disguise. With the case of the Cyclops, he's just kind of being a dick.
Yeah.
Like, he's just kind of, it's his hubris. It's his wit. He's this great strategist.
That's like it's very much the vibe sort of like the George Clooney brother,
yes,
oh art thou.
Absolutely.
And that's really, I mean, historically, Odysseus was known as like the cleverest of the generals.
The most adaptable man is, I think, a line in the Wilson translation.
And that is also, I know, presented as sort of in opposition to other people going to the Trojan War who are like known about brute force.
Yes.
And I think, too, that makes it even more interesting, sort of like the personal journey he goes on to relook at the brute force that he enables.
And also, it's a big difference with making Damon's Odysseus not as witty, not as much of a trickster. He's a little more straightforward, more of the everyman, more of the Damon type that we're used to. And this is the first time you really see that like big difference in how it's handled. And so as someone who read the poem, I will say at first I was a little disappointed in the scene, because that was my favorite scene in the poem. And I was like, this is missing a little bit of that thrill that I got from Claire Danes narrating it. And she does a fantastic job narrating this. It's really, really entertaining. But on second viewing of the film, I was like, it works on its own, because it is a really great set piece, a really great piece of horror. And it is thrilling, just in a different way. So that's one of the big major differences. I don't know if this is exactly what comes next, but let's talk about it anyway. Let's talk about Troy. So a big difference is that we actually get Troy in more detail in the movie than we would have gotten in the poem. And Telemachus,
it's really presented as flashbacks. Like, to me, I've seen some people be like, first of all, shut up. I mean, who cares? But I've seen a lot of people be like, oh, that's in the Iliad. And I actually think like we are always seeing Troy in flashback. We are, they're not saying like it's part of this linear narrative.
It's really well done, and I'm really glad they did it. So Telemachus goes to visit Menelaus, who is the brother of Agamemnon. I am not going to try to explain why the Trojan War happens, but unless you want to, Sophie, go ahead. Explain why the Trojan War happens.
I'm not going to get all the names right. Okay. Paris and Helen of Troy and Helen of Sparta.
Helen is Menelaus's wife.
Paris and Helen run away to Troy, and Agamemnon is basically like, this is so offensive, I have to like go get her back. And so he unites all the kings around, like, so Odysseus being one of them, and they all go to Troy to get Helen back.
Exactly. And in the movie, it is presented as Agamemnon used this as an excuse to disrupt kind of the order of things.
That too.
Yes.
I mean, I think like using like one woman, they were looking for an excuse. But I think too, and one of the things I found most powerful, and I'd be really curious to hear if any of this is in the poem, but the Helen of Troy scenes, like the scenes with Lupita, really emotionally impacted me.
We should ask the professors about that, because I do not remember if that's as detailed in the poem or not.
and I'll just elaborate a little bit, but really this feeling of like, I never wanted this. Like, you
Right.
did this, quote
Right.
unquote, in my name.
Right.
And I didn't want this. I don't love this person. This wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Was just really devastating. And I think Lupita only has a few moments, a few minutes
Yes.
of
Yeah.
screen time, but I had never really like seen or thought of the character in that way or seen it
Sure.
depicted. And I thought it
Yeah.
was really impactful.
And that's a really good scene. Telemachus goes to visit Menelaus. It's the
Backstory.
wedding of their daughter, Menelaus and Helen. And we see the example of Zeus's law demonstrated really well here, how they are welcomed in as strangers and asked to meet directly with the king. And Menelaus, I think, clocks pretty early on that
He's
this
like,
is
hey, you're
Odysseus'
Odysseus'
son. And he
son.
just starts telling him the stories of Odysseus because Telemachus is looking for any information about his father. So he tells him about Troy, and we get the honestly probably the most riveting
My
set
favorite
piece
scene in the
of
movie.
the entire film. Let's talk a little bit about one how
I
they
did
did
not
this.
breathe. I did
So
not breathe.
you literally see the soldiers and so we should note that Menelaus is played by John Bernthal, who is, I think, great in his little scene that he's in. The guys next to me, huge Bernthal fans. They got so excited when he appeared on screen.
I love that guy. I'm always happy to see
great.
him.
But we're in the horse with Matt Damon, with John Bernthal. And apparently, a few days before filming that scene, Damon asked Nolan, how are we going to do that? And he said, I don't know. and then on the day, they all crammed into the horse. And then Nolan and the cinematographer, Hoyt van Hoytema, got in with a camera, and that's how they filmed it. Insane.
It is, I will say, that entire part of them inside and then the sacking of Troy. To me, that is when the soundtrack, or sorry,
the score.
Do I say score?
Yeah.
That is when the score just holy crap. And I think that is like a scene that will stay with me forever when they are silently coming down from that horse and ransacking, and the amping up of the violence to the full scene. Oh my God.
It's remarkable, especially how quiet it is when they are getting out of the horse. Now, when we open the gates, I mean, that scene.
Did you read about this? That they surprised Matt Damon. He didn't know that all those people were waiting back there to rush in. He thought it was like 20 people at the front line, and then they were going to yell cut. And he said 500 people just rushed at him from the dark.
Well, that scene, that shot where you see Agamemnon start walking forward and then all the men behind him start rushing. I mean, amazing.
So
you want to talk about like aura farming? Like Agamemnon,
I want his braid. I
film,
want the metal horse braid. I think that should be our next like fashion moment.
Yeah. That's just like an incredible shot of those men racing in, and then the carnage that comes from that. And apparently there were 2,000 extras for that scene, all in, the period specific garb. And it's just an incredible action scene. It's what Nolan does so well. It reminded me of some of his Dark Knight action scenes, but on a grander scale. And it's incredible. And I'm so glad he chose to put this in there. And it works really well for the story as well, because we get that scene where after they're talking about it, Telemachus says, you didn't tell me new news about my father, but you told me about who he was as a man. Mm-hmm. And it's like one of those emotional moments that really resonates. And I think it's incredible stuff. It's so well done.
Yeah, and I'm really someone who does not like gratuitous violence. I am not like necessarily
it's
action.
Not that violent.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is it is not like that. I think that violence in this movie is used really intentionally.
Sure,
what you see is it's not superfluous. It's there to serve a point. And I also think you really need that Troy scene to have the real message of the movie land, and to really sort of, a lot of this is reframing. Troy was not some heroic act. We did not win in this situation. Like, we lost for everyone.
Yep. In terms of plot, let's talk a little bit more about Odysseus's journey. So there is the Circe scene. We've talked about the passage to the channel.
Can
There's
I
the
mention one of my other
underworld.
faves?
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of my other faves was the siren scene. That's
Oh yeah,
another
very
one where I
brief,
think
but well done.
his choice around it. So what he does in the movie is we see the different soldiers put wax in their ears so that they don't hear the siren
sound is
song.
amazing when that happens.
And
yeah.
just Odysseus is strapped to the mast of the ship and hearing it, but we don't hear anything. We hear the silence, and that is so smart and so impactful. And I will say, I think that's Matt Damon's like strongest acting. He is, you like feel it. It is visceral.
Well, and we
I thought it was so successful.
What the siren song is. It's like everything you wanted and then everything you didn't want to know. And then also it's his realization that maybe he does not actually want to come home. And that is not something that's revealed in the poem. That is not, you don't get that sort of explanation of what it sounded like.
Yeah, that I had not heard like the idea of like him not wanting to go home, because it's clear. I mean, this is something that is not, I just know is not as clear in the movie versus the epic poem, is like he is like two different women he's like having long-term romantic relationships with and not returning to his wife. So Circe and Calypso. Yes. And like he both times has to sort of be like, oh yeah, I like want to go back.
Well, so in the poem, he wants to go home, but like keeps going on all these like side quests that derail him on his long journey home. In the movie, he clearly has PTSD from what he wrought in Troy, because he is the one who came up with the idea to give the horse as a gift, as an idea of hospitality. They welcome it beyond the gates, and it brings hell and destruction on everybody. And he is tormented by what happened in Troy, what's happening in civilization as a whole, and really who should lead Ithaca in the future, which is not necessarily the way he thinks in the poem. I
don't think we knew what PTSD was in 8000 BCE.
Let's talk about the Circe scene as well, which I think precedes the siren scene, and that is very different from the poem. In the poem, the men drink a potion and are turned into pigs, and Odysseus does not. And then he kind of convinces Circe like to untransform them, and then they have like a year of rest and relaxation.
Yeah,
where they just kind of hang out.
Someone shared the passage of which I read from the Odyssey, of him being like, hey, you turned all my men into pigs. And then she's like, have sex with me. And he's like, well, all right.
Yeah.
Okay,
and then. That's basically what happens for a year. But in the film, it is instead this like very brief, but incredibly powerful, like gothic folk horror scene.
I feel like an A24 like body horror movie. Yes. It's like, what the hell?
Also, another example of the filmmaking at play. Practical transformation, transforming the men into pigs.
How?
Costumes. I mean, makeup, you know?
It is, first of all, disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. But oh my God. Oh, and her whole speech. I mean, talk about like Samantha Morton, put her in, like this is what she's made for. Yes. And also like Samantha Morton Hive rise up, people being like, who is this? I'm like, you have been missing out. That's on you. I think she is someone I'm always happy to see pop up.
And she's great. I mean, it is a powerful
Circe is a sorceress, right. An enchantress. Circe is a really complex, complicated character who has been exiled on this island, and she brings so much power to that role in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's a really remarkable scene. And that sends Odysseus to the gates of hell, essentially, the underworlds, to Hades. Yeah. And
have you seen Hades Town, Rudi?
Yes, I have.
I was very excited once we started to get to like the Hades Town adjacent part of this story.
I loved this scene. I thought the score really hit during this. And the score, we can talk really briefly about Ludwig Göransson. Incredible. Like he just in general, he's probably going to win his 4th Oscar for this.
I love when he makes speeches.
What I love about Ludwig Göransson is that he made the music on the show Community, which I was a huge fan of, the Joel McHale, Donald Glover show. He used to do Donald Glover's rap alter ego, Childish Gambino. He was his producer. So he comes from this lineage of making hip hop beats. And that's that's what his scores sound like. There is this driving aspect to his score that marries kind of hip hop production with what feels like period appropriate
Mm-hmm.
sounds. It's very rhythmic. There's stomping, there's
Yeah.
clapping, using the sound of the ship as part of the score. Every time Odysseus strums his bow and you hear that, what I assume is like a lyre, make that note, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, it's magical. It is loud, it's aggressive, it's weird at times. It's great. I love the
It's
score,
so
and it
good.
hits really well in that underworld scene, which is really where Odysseus has to start to reckon with what he has wrought. He
Yeah.
communicates with the ghost, if you will, or the underworld version of Sinon and Agamemnon, and Benny Safdie gets his couple of lines, basically warning him not to
You
go through
can't
the front
convince me
door.
he's in this movie, basically. I
He's
will say
there.
this is another practical effects one. Apparently, they were buried alive under
Yes.
the sand and were snorkels and had a countdown to do it. I mean, I don't know. That's like when I'm kind of like, all right, I don't know if I need this SAG card. Like, I'm out.
James
But
Remar as Tiresias is great as like
it's,
the
oh,
one who gives
really
him the
good.
prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
He is fantastic, and
And this is really
Odysseus.
Elliot Page's like even bigger
Yes,
scene. This is really where I think he really
yes,
shines, and you also learn about like even more about what happened with Antonius, the Robert Pattinson character, and how
Antinius.
evil Antonius and how
Yeah,
evil he is. And I was just so happy to see Elliot Page in this role. And I think too,
yeah,
I
he's
don't
great.
think it was some woke choice, but I do also think it's a powerful statement for Christopher Nolan to
Yes,
cast Elliot Page in a role that's self-defined. It's like the bravest man alive, I
right,
think is how
right.
Odysseus describes him. I think it's a really wonderful choice, and Elliot Page does a great job in the role.
Yes. Some other trials and tribulations that we see Odysseus and his men go through, the Laestrygonians, which are the big people, the
The
big
big
dudes in
people,
armor. That's
yeah.
changed a little bit. They're like cannibals in the poem. I honestly was like, I don't really know what this is. It's just like these big dudes that are attacking them. But I will say
7 foot
this.
tall extras with 5 foot tall extras to make
The
that one work.
score, I was listening to the score yesterday, like on its own, it rips during that scene. Like, highly recommend you check out that song
Yeah.
of the score because it's like really good. And we talked about going through the passage. We get to eventually the beach where the sun god keeps his cows, and that is what ultimately dooms the men because they eat the cows that they're not supposed to eat, and that sends Odysseus on his way to Calypso, which also
This
kind
one,
of
so
sends him on his way home.
this got the biggest laugh in my theater was when he
Which
says,
part?
like, did you think that if you
Yes.
hid that like we wouldn't see you eat the
Classic
hamburgers?
Matt Damon
I was just like, that's funny.
Matt Damon line. And that really sets up the end game, which is
Mm-hmm.
Odysseus going back to Ithaca in disguise as a beggar.
I will say the only part of this movie I found unrealistic, which is a ridiculous sentence, was when he lays on the raft and somehow just like washes
Just
up in
well, okay,
Ithaca.
so let's talk about that because
Can you tell me what happens? Because I
what
didn't
we
get that.
haven't talked about is the gods. So the
Barely in
gods are
this.
very much downplayed
Mm-hmm.
as figures in this, but if you watch the movie thinking about their presence, they are there throughout. Even
Mm.
at the very beginning when that first beggar comes in to the banquet hall at the castle and Telemachus says, "You have Athena's eyes. You never know. He could be a god in disguise." And then thunder cracks. That is meant to be a sign of Zeus sending his thunder. And you will see Calypso
Can I?
often looking up and around as if she's waiting for a sign from the gods. And so the way that Odysseus, for example, gets back to Ithaca, it's Athena, played by Zendaya
Zendaya.
in the film. The only god we really see
Yeah,
is Athena.
I very much interpreted it to me. This felt like a more human retelling of the
Yes.
Odyssey.
I
It
think
is more.
it's more that they they believe
it's how they
in the
experience,
gods.
it's how they
Yes.
would experience the gods, through weather, through random things.
Absolutely.
You wouldn't experience it by Zeus coming down and being like, rawr.
And in the poem, the gods are characters. They have lines. They're much more involved. Athena.
What do you think about his decision to not put other gods into this movie?
I think this was so smart. I really do. I mean, Athena accompanies Telemachus for a lot of the first part of the story. I think that having it be more of a like existential threat or an existential being and more of a faith kind of principle, I think it's more effective in that way, and it grounds it in like reality a bit more.
It would have felt a little sillier.
Yes.
With gods in it.
I do. I
it
think
makes it
just
feel
using
like a Disney
Athena,
movie.
Just using Athena, I think works because you need to have some representation.
We barely use Athena. I mean,
because like Athena transforms Odysseus throughout. Like Odysseus is a shapeshifter in the poem, and so when he comes back home, he is transformed to look really old. He doesn't just naturally look old, and then she transforms him to look really young. When he's revealed to Telemachus.
Athena's doing some like light plastic surgery work in her spare time.
Yeah, essentially. So it's very different in that sense, and I think again a smart choice for a modern audience and a modern telling of this.
I did not
story.
Miss them.
Athena essentially becomes like, yes, Athena is still a guide and is pushing him to do certain things, but also kind of a moral voice of reason, and literally in the way that Athena manifests as Zendaya's character, which we later, or Zendaya's presence, which we later learn is also a priestess who is beheaded at Troy, that Odysseus locked eyes with while a Athena statue's head was also being cut off. And so I think it's a persistent memory for him of everything that he's wrought while he communicates with this god who has his back, basically. And that's, I think, also another interesting thing about the Odyssey as a story is that when you're reading the poem, one of the things I found frustrating was that it feels like the gods are just in control. It doesn't really matter what they do because the gods are just going to make whatever happen. Yeah. And in the movie, it doesn't, yes, things are fated, and yes, the gods are pulling the strings, but it doesn't feel as pronounced. It feels like Odysseus does have some agency. The characters actually do have agency in the choices that they make, which I didn't feel quite as strongly in the poem because there's so much talk of the gods. And Odysseus is often described as the godlike Odysseus, said over and over again, the godlike Odysseus, which is never even, his physique is never even talked about in the film.
Well, we see it.
But
Matt
it's
Damon
not,
takes his shirt off quite a few times.
It's not made a thing, his power is not really expressed in the way it is in the poem. And so Odysseus comes home, and again, this is a bit of a difference in that he comes and intercepts Telemachus and essentially helps Telemachus evade the suitors who have been plotting to kill Telemachus. Instead, Odysseus first is like disguised talking to like a beggar or a servant or something like that. Then he's talking to John Leguizamo's character, Eumaeus. He also talks to his father, Laertes, who is not part of the film at all. And Telemachus does not figure out that Odysseus is Odysseus. He is told by Athena, because Athena says, all right, it's time to tell Telemachus that you're who you are. And she transforms him back into his like normal self. And so that's how it's revealed. So instead of the whole scene with Argo, where the dog, where Odysseus comes in, sees the dog, kind of pets it, and you see the dog's tail wag, and then it dies. And that's how Telemachus realizes that it's him. That is a very quick scene in the poem where it's like, we learn about the dog, we're reminded of the dog, the dog sees him, and then the dog dies. That's much more quick. It's not
like
this
the
like
first
emotional
example.
core.
Wow, it's probably like a really broad statement, but it to me seems like the first mention in literature of dogs being beloved. I will say the way they do it with that dog's tail just stopping wagging immediately after, I was just like, what the fuck?
Yes.
And I'm okay with it because it is in the Odyssey.
Yes.
Whereas I don't think the dogs getting barbecued or getting thrown off the cliff were in the Odyssey.
I don't think so, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah,
it would have been
I think
minor things.
The dog barbecue.
I don't think throwing off the cliff is, because again, Argos isn't as big,
they
as
picked
important of a character, not an emotional framing device the way that it is in the movie.
I definitely had the idea that I would name a dog Argos after watching this.
Oh, that is. I should also note that is something that Emily Wilson has a problem with. So she gave an interview with the AP where she questioned both the absence of the gods on screen. She has some issues with the incoherent messaging that condemns both war and physical cowardice. She found Penelope's role to be thinned out, and she said that the scenes with Argos, quote, catered toward modern sentimentality. Everybody's a sucker for a dog.
That is correct.
It works. Chill. Like, you're not the only person.
All right. I don't know if we can tell Emily Wilson to chill. She's like the one person who doesn't have to chill in this situation. But I do find in general, look, I'm the person who usually comes on this podcast and talks a really big game about the changes made and why they piss me off in a lot of cases. But I do think trying to say that Greek myths and oral tradition and these stories that have been around and interpreted a million ways for so many years cannot take creative liberties is like one of the silliest things I could hear. These stories are so old. They are meant for reinvention and reinterpretation. And I have really enjoyed some reading that I've done, different articles around like, it is meant to be interpreted for a new time. That is like part of what makes it so timeless over millennia.
Well, okay. So I think of it a little bit this way because I listened to the audiobook. So I experienced it. Like, I know people have their issues with audiobooks and whether they're reading, right?
Not here, not in this home. Audiobooks are reading. We don't say otherwise. I do think you're kind of wild for doing this via audiobook. Like, I could not have paid attention to it. I would have never
read it if I had to actually read it. And so listening to it, also, I wanted to listen to it because it felt true to how most people first discovered this story when it was being written. You heard it. Yeah. You experienced it performed by a poet, in this case, Claire Danes, who does a great job of being theatrical with her performance. I experienced it the way that it was originally experienced. And I think that was a helpful way to experience the story and understand it as well in the context of Nolan's Odyssey, because this is just another interpretation. And just like we wrote the Odyssey into text to be read, we are now putting it on screen to be consumed as a full every sense experience. And that is what our modern sensibility is made for, to experience a story like this. We have the technology to make a story like this. I want to see it brought to life that way. And Nolan is doing, as you noted, an interpretation of this story. His version of Odysseus is more of the everyman. He is more like, he's a little Jason Bourne. He's a little
John Wick.
Damon, can't help it. He's a little John Wick. He's a little superhero, but he's also Oppenheimer. He is someone who is haunted by the choices that he has made. And so at the end of the film, when he returns to Ithaca in disguise, he has a really like wonderful scene with Penelope and Hathaway, where he is essentially, as he's calling himself Sinon, as this beggar, is telling his wife why he hasn't come home, what he's struggling with the PTSD, what he has wrought, what he is worried about with society. And it's really well done. And then we get the awesome ending kind of like action sequence, which is,
sorry, Rudi, before we go into the action sequence, is that the scene though? I think that's where he sort of says like, we are the sea people.
Yes.
And I think that really that was a reveal. Like
that was a reveal. Yeah. So throughout the film, there is this sort of like ominous threat of sea people who are defying Zeus's law. And in that moment, Odysseus reveals that it's been him. He's one of the sea people defying Zeus's law by sacking cities, or as we see earlier in the film, or by literally bringing the Trojan horse as a gift and then destroying
by
a
eating the
civilization.
cattle, by going to
Yes.
the Cyclops's house and killing him, or damaging him. Really just seeing all these examples, and that really, like, in the moment, that reframing. And it's called the Odyssey. Odysseus is the hero. That's how we think of this. And
Yes.
this reframing, like, really knocked my socks off.
I agree. And I think that's part of the reason why Nolan chose to make him a little more human and less of this trickster, like cunning kind of character. It was to ground him in this shame that he feels for what he has brought on society and the coming dark ages that he very much sees will follow very soon.
Absolutely. And yeah, I this feels like a really human retelling. I think it makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
as we said, we don't really hear Agamemnon speak, like this like big warrior, like guy, everything. It's like we are hearing him, and I'm so sorry. What is the guy he's in the boat with who's so good?
Yes.
Hamish Patel?
Hamish Patel, who plays Eurycles.
Thank you.
Eurycles. Who's wonderful.
Talk about
he is
someone
like the
I'm
voice
happy.
of reason. He's also like,
so to me,
like, why are we doing that?
That's a really human feeling character and foil for Odysseus. And also, I will say he is one of the stars of Station 11, an adaptation of the Emily St. John Mandel book. So great job for him in adaptation work.
Yeah.
But it feels really human, and I love that is a story we are getting right now. That is a really cool perspective to take here. And that's why something like this is so fun. You could make, not that I want Nolan to go do this, but in theory, it's like he could make the same movie from the perspective of the gods, and it would be a completely different movie. Yeah. And I love the path he took.
And so at the end, we get this test of strength, basically. Penelope says that she will so earlier when I do think it's worth highlighting this one scene earlier when Tom Holland comes home. He has a conversation with Penelope. This is Anne Hathaway's Oscar scene. Where he is basically like, you just need to like get married so that I can be king. And this is the plan that I've hatched with Menelaus. And she is like, I want them to burn. And I have been on the throne. I have been on this throne. Yeah. She gives this.
She doesn't say that in the Odyssey, right?
I don't think so. I don't think it's that like extreme.
I think we would have heard about that before.
It's an incredible scene. It is so Anne Hathaway is always so good, but the way that her face, how evocative she is when she walks away and like basically slams the door, like at one point in another scene, like incredible.
Yeah, no,
she's gonna win an Oscar for that scene, I think. But
she is so strong in this, and I'm really curious because I had also seen Emily Wilson say that the character had been thinned and she wasn't like as happy. I'm really curious what she wishes was in there, because to me that character actually felt pretty fleshed out.
I felt the same way, and there's nothing that I felt like off the top of my head I was like, oh, I'm really missing that, except maybe at the very end there is one more test in the poem that she gives Odysseus about their bed. It's like immovable and only you would know that, and that's like the final test to be like, oh, you actually are who you say you are. Whereas, I think it's pretty clear in the scene where he is the beggar that she knows that it's him. And so then she devises this challenge where someone has to string Odysseus's bow and shoot it through these like axes.
I did find this is like an off comment, but I found every time Matt Damon shot a bow to be unconvincing. He was always doing it like to the side of his body. It confused me.
And then we watch as all the suitors, including Robert Pattinson, who we haven't talked about very much, but like we need to talk about Pattinson.
Wait,
he's
first
so
of all,
good.
This is my favorite part of the movie, maybe, which is when he keeps being like, swords,
my turn.
Swords, go. And he's being like, spears, go. And he just starts naming weapons, but doing nothing. He's such a little bitch.
Like,
he's so
sniveling little bastard. Like,
he is hateable in this.
He's so good. He has so many good faces that he makes, where he'll just like kind of make a face and it's perfect. He is
Plate liquor.
he's great. He will probably get nominated for an Oscar. I mean, for a supporting role. He is so good in this. We get this like battle sequence that like I don't know. To me, this was like a little too action movie, but I was like, whatever, we have to
I
have
have a
this.
really hard time anytime they tell
It's
me
not
that
as
one
big in the
person can
poem.
beat 30 people. It's like
I know.
I
Yeah.
just don't think that's how that works.
Yeah, I know. But it's
This
fine.
is the moment, honestly, in the movie where I did for the first time look at my phone and look to see
gotta
what
have
time
the
it was.
big action like climax at the
I
end.
was literally
so.
like, if it is not at the 3 hour mark right now, I'm gonna be mad. And it was like 2:57, and I was like, okay.
I mean, in the poem,
end.
his dad Laertes, who's like dying, is like also part of this fight because I think Athena imbues him with some power or something. It's a little bit different. That's an entire
character that just isn't.
Yeah, and it's fine. I get it. It's the same with like eliminating the Phaeacians, and they also eliminate some characters that Telemachus goes to visit. Like they just try to simplify and iron things out. And then a big difference at the end is this idea that Odysseus and Penelope ride off into the west to pay tribute to the people soldiers. That the fallen soldiers and the other people that he's wronged in exile, and Telemachus becomes king. That is not how the poem ends. The poem ends with Odysseus just getting back on the throne. There's no reckoning with what he's done in that way. There's no sailing off into the distance. So again, it speaks to how Nolan has adapted this story for our times and given his own interpretation on it. The story just kind of ends. It's kind of like, all right, he's back and we're good. I mean, there's kind of like, now. I think a little bit of a conversation where like the gods are like, okay, so like we're all going to be like cool now. There's a great line at the end about how this like story will only be told through a song because that's the only way they'll know it, because there's so many people who are illiterate, and that is of course something that comes true. All right, so last couple things I want to talk about before we wrap up. I want to talk about a couple of performances maybe we haven't hit on. I want to talk about the editing really quick. So Jennifer Lame, who came on with Tenet, she previously edited some films you probably like, Frances Ha and Marriage Story being two of them.
Very much enjoy.
Another one being Hereditary. She has a great editing style, clearly was tasked with a really tough job to, I think it was like she had 6 or 9 hours of footage to cut down, does a masterful job weaving this story together. Really curious how much of this was on the page, how much of it was her kind of cutting everything together. It's clear that Nolan has found a really great partner in Jennifer Lame, who will again probably win another Oscar, as many people will. Matt Damon, we talked about him a lot. I mean, I think he's great. I was really like questioning whether he would be the right person for this role, but I think the version that Nolan creates, which is the prototypical Nolan protagonist, it's a little Oppenheimer, it's a little Batman, it's, you know, many of these characters he's done in the past, but I think Damon does it well.
I agree. I was also very skeptical of this just because of he's so recognizable, and sometimes
he's got enough gravitas that it works.
I agree with you though. I think it's for this interpretation, it's really good.
Yes.
I get it now.
And we just talked about Anne Hathaway. She's incredible. Give her an Oscar.
Good.
Tom Holland. At first, I was like, I don't know.
Don't you think it's supposed to be the character, though?
I think it's supposed to be the character. On second viewing, I was like, I actually like him more. And I think the scene where he realizes it's his dad is really special. Let's also talk about that real quick. The modern language. Obviously, everyone speaks American accent because of Matt Damon.
I didn't
totally
care.
fine with it. Don't care. The use of words like dad, fine with me. I think it's a little weird, like in the moment, but it works. And this is kind of a parallel to the Wilson translation because she does use some words that feel more modern. She uses the word tote bag. You know, like I think I've listened to you party is in the movie, right? That's something Penelope says to the suitor. Stuff is a word that comes up. I mean, I think it's totally fine. I don't have a problem with any of that. In terms of the rest of the cast, we didn't talk too much about John Leguizamo as, I think it's Eumaeus, the blind seer swineherd who is loyal to Odysseus and the keeper of Argos. He's great. I mean, he's He's really good.
I've never seen him not be great in anything.
He's really good. Zendaya, underused, doesn't really make a huge
I actually,
impact.
to be honest, like can't even make a judgment on the performance because I don't think they give her a single thing to do.
We talked about Charlize Theron and Samantha Morton. Polyphemus is actually Bill Irwin, who is an actor who
was
definitely seen in
Polyphemus?
things. The Cyclops. So that actually is an actor kind of acting as him.
That's great.
Let's see. We did briefly talk about Himesh Patel, who I think is great, and for part of the movie is almost like the co-lead at times.
Yeah,
like,
and of course, as people have said, like barely billed with the others, like in the pictures with all the stars. It's like,
but incredibly important, and is really the voice of reason.
He is so good in that character.
Corey Hawkins as one of the suitors who tries to kill Tom Holland early on in the film. He's great. Telemachus. Yeah, I mean, this is a great movie. Everyone's really good. It's so well put together. It's great crafts. I mean, everything about it. We will talk more about this, I think, throughout the year. I mean, we're not done talking about the Odyssey. We obviously have
and we're gonna record another episode and really, I think, like get into the written history, oral history of all of this. Rudi, my God, it's time for you to make a very important choice. Did you like the book or the movie better?
Or in this case, the epic poem.
Well, did you enjoy the epic poem or the film better?
So I've thought a lot about this. And here's what I will say. I like the movie more. This is not a surprise, obviously. I really did enjoy my experience listening to Claire Danes narrate the poem. And the Wilson translation, it is very approachable. It did not, at first I was like, this is going to be homework. It felt like homework when it first started because it does begin with 3 hours of like her basically annotating her translation. And that was hard to get through because I was like, what is going on? We are just jumping around. I'm learning all this information, really helpful, interesting stuff, but it was not what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Then you get into the story and I was like, okay, I'm into this. I appreciate this. I understand it. As you've pointed out, there were times when I would zone out and I would have to go back and try to remember, okay, what did I just miss? Because if you miss a line, that can sort of, you can miss what's going on. I think that if you enjoyed seeing Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, you should read or listen to the Wilson translation. It will enrich your understanding of The Odyssey. It will enrich really your understanding of the film too, because you will learn in detail how he changed things. We covered some of the changes and we'll talk more about the changes when we talk with the professors in the next episode. But there's a lot more and a lot more that I don't even remember that was tweaked. But the Cyclops scene, again, thrilling in the story. I think the way some of it is drawn out more is also really well done in the poem. There's just a lot more depth to it, and you get a lot more, and you get a completely different Odysseus. And I think if you're interested and you want to understand the original story, give it a listen or give it a read. I think you will get something out of it. It's really enjoyable, and it is breezier than it seems. But this is a film that is so good. It's so well made. You should see it in the theater. See it on the loudest screen you can. See it multiple times. I think you will get more out of it. I really did the second time that I saw it. I was not sure I wanted to see it a second time so quickly. And I'm so glad that I did, because not only did it make me more prepared for this podcast, but it also made me appreciate the film even more. And I'm going to try to probably see it a third time in actual IMAX 70 millimeter when I'm in New York next month. So this is a story and a film I think we're going to be talking about for a long time. And he did it justice. I got to give him credit. He really did.
And I will put in an additional plug. If you are curious about some of the side characters in this, especially the women, there's just a plethora of historical fiction books out there, which are probably even more approachable than listening to a translated version of the Odyssey. Not just Madeline Miller's books, but several others that I will never be able to remember all the authors of.
There's a Margaret Atwood story about Penelope.
There's a Margaret Atwood, but there are stories about Circe, Calypso, Penelope, Sirens, everyone, and it's such fun lore and history to explore. So add those to your summer reading list. They're great.
And watch Oh Brother, Where Art Thou and try to figure out how that story was adapted, because it's pretty Pretty cool. So the next time you see us, we will be talking more Odyssey.
Yes.
With some actual experts who will tell us more about that. Just a quick reminder to rate, like, review, subscribe to It Was a Book First wherever you get your podcast. You can follow us on Instagram at It Was a Book First Pod, on TikTok at It Was a Book First. Watch the episode on YouTube at It Was a Book First Podcast, or visit our website, itwasabookfirst.com. Have a question for us or want to reach out about something, email us at itwasabookfirstpod.com. And with that, we will see you next time to talk more about the Odyssey.
Thanks, Rudi.
Thanks, Sophie. It Was a Book First is hosted and produced by Sophie Vershbow and Rudi Greenberg. Music written by Cliff Blum and John Connolly, produced by Kevin Potts. Logo by Trisha Louise Prieto. Website by Kevin Fobb. Follow us on Instagram at It Was a Book First Pod, and we'll see you next week.